writer's block, burnout, lack of inspiration. These are all things that writers face on a daily basis. But I've found one thing that can really help to alleviate this, and that's the writing routine. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own unique writing routine using math. Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. If you want a writing routine, you've come to the right place, and I know that math sounds scary, at least it does to me. I never liked it, but it's not math in the way you're thinking of. What I'm talking about is my writing routine formula, which is time plus length plus frequency equals writing routine. Let me break that down for you. So basically, the time is the time of day that you should be writing. The length is how long you should be writing at that time. And the frequency is how often you should be writing. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about how to figure out all of these different things in a moment, but I just wanted to outline the basic equation that we're going to be using to discover our writing routines. So I'm going to be going through this video and almost posing questions. So maybe get out your phone and open up a notes document, or if you're already watching this on your phone, grab a notebook or a piece of paper, because it's quiz time. And the first thing we're going to be talking about is time. First up, I want you to ask yourself when you feel most inspired. This can be all sorts of times. I know it's a cliche that people get inspired in the shower, but that's because it's true. I mean, at least it's true for me. I am definitely super guilty of that, and I can't write in the shower, but we'll get onto that bit later. For now, just write down any time that you are inspired. And I don't care if that does mean you say, I'm inspired in the shower. Write down every possible time that you get inspired. Maybe you have ideas right before bed, or right when you wake up. Maybe you have ideas when you're in the shower, or right after you get back from the gym. It doesn't have to have any rhyme or reason. It's just when you have noticed a theme of you feeling inspiration. Then I want you to figure out what time you actually have available for you to write in. Now we're getting to the practical side, because I know that writing in the shower or writing right before bed is maybe not practical. If you feel inspired in the middle of the night, that doesn't mean you should wake up in the middle of the night to write. I mean, I guess you could try it. Maybe you're gonna discover some genius level new writing routine, but I know that wouldn't work for me. That doesn't mean I don't ever feel inspired at midnight. I just go back to bed even though I do feel inspired. So practicality is also important. I know that a lot of people have school or work. I have work. You might be watching this and be like, when am I supposed to write? I have 3 kids. I don't know. And I'm not telling you that just because you feel inspired at a time is when it's going to always work out, but you should write down all the times you feel inspired and then all the time that you actually have free. And then you ask yourself, when do these 2 times overlap? When does your inspiration at time overlap with your free time? I know that for me, my writing routine right now is that I write every night after work. Now, is this my ideal inspiration time? Not really. A lot of times I actually feel sort of like tired or unfocused after work. However, it's the only time that I'm able to truly set aside just for writing. And we'll get into how to train yourself to use a certain writing routine for practical purposes later on in the video. That will be the last thing we cover, so stick around for that. And subscribe while you're at it. For now, we're just going to be talking about when your inspiration times and your free times overlap. And if there isn't a time that overlaps, that's okay. That's what we'll get into later. But just try and see if any of them do and mark all of those down. Maybe like highlight them all. Because now we're moving on to the length. Now, I know that you're going to want to say, I never get bored when I'm writing, but I mean, I do. So don't feel bad about that. Don't feel like just because you're a writer means that you need to feel like you should be writing at all times. You don't have to write every day to be a writer. You don't even have to write every week to be a writer. Maybe on NaNoWriMo, you write a novel, or you try to, and that's all you do that year. That's still a writer. You're still writing. So don't feel bad about your answer to any of these. When do you start to get bored? Let's be honest with ourselves here. I can usually write for like 3-4 hours max before my mind starts to wander, or something pulls me away and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that my writing was starting to suck towards the end there. And that's totally fine. 4 hours is like my maximum. And I don't even usually reach that point because something comes up before then. So I would say the maximum length for my writing sprint would be 4 hours. Then the next question is, when do you begin to feel creatively burnt out or that your progress has stopped being good? Now, this isn't quite the same as being bored, but I'd say they're similar enough. Often one leads to the other. I've found that if I start to be discouraged partway through my writing, it's better to just stop than force myself to keep going, because I'll just write something bad. And that's not because I'm a bad writer or because of any sort of insecurity you're going to start to pin on yourself. It's just because once in a while you hit a dead end and you should turn around and walk out of the alley instead of hitting your head against the brick wall over and over. So you should have the maximum amount of time that your writing sprint will be. Not based practically, we'll get to that later, but right now, just how long can you write before you begin to feel bored or creatively burnt out? For me, that's 4 hours. Then ask yourself how long you could realistically set aside to write in. For me, that's more like 1 hour, so I don't really need to worry about hitting that 4-hour burnout point. And I personally think that you should always set up your writing so that you don't hit that burnout point. I like to finish my writing wanting to keep going. That way, the next day, it's easier to get myself to write again. I'm not like, oh, I made a ton of progress yesterday, I don't need to write today. I'm like, yes, I'm hungry for more words. So if I stop after an hour, because practically that's just what I have to do, then the next day I'll be looking forward to my writing hour. You should tailor your routine so that you never hit burnout. And I'm not saying that having a good writing routine will mean you never get burnt out and you never gonna have writer's block, but I do think that it can help. At least for me, I like structure. And if you're watching this, then there's a chance you do too. I like to know when I'm going to be writing, how much I'm going to be writing for, what chapter I'm working on, and I've found that scheduling out my writing routine and having it be repetitive and almost monotonous in that way has helped me make progress, because I'm not a spontaneous person. I'm not. I'd like to think I am, I'd like to say I was, but I'm not. I go to bed by 10 o'clock every night. It's totally fine. Like, I'm not missing out on anything, really. So just tailor your life to the person you actually are. I like to have structure in my life. I like to have a to-do list. I like to have a calendar. I like to have a calendar to-do list. So my writing is on that calendar to-do list. And having a routine that revolves around this sort of structure makes writing better for me. Maybe you want something spontaneous. Maybe you want something structured. Figure out the way that you like to work, the way that your brain works, and just keep messing with things until you find something you're like, oh, this is me. Just wait until that something clicks. And you can redo this process as many times as you like, figure out as many different writing routines as you want until just one of them will one day work. Now we're going to be talking about frequency. So the third and final part of this little math equation that we have made is the frequency of your writing routine. And there's a couple different factors that can play into this. So I'm going to talk about all of them, as per usual. First up, how often do you want to write? Don't worry about realism right now. We worry about that later. Maybe you want to write once a day. Maybe you want to write twice a day. Maybe you only really want to write twice a week. Once a month. Just because it's not super consistently every day doesn't mean there's anything to feel bad about or be ashamed of. It doesn't mean that you can't make progress. I've actually run into this recently. I thought that a good writing routine meant I had to be writing every single day, making progress every single day. I am currently working on a novel, and I really wanted to finish draft 2 in a couple months. I was like, I wrote half of draft 1 in a month and a half. I could probably finish draft 2, which will have less work than draft 1 did, in just like, I don't know, 3 months. That was the plan. That was not realistic at all, and I spent pretty much all of January just staring at this mountain that I had told myself I had to climb very quickly with no gear, just being like, I'm too scared of the mountain. And so I never actually started making that progress I had promised myself. However, towards the end of January, I noticed this. I noticed that the frequency and the progress that I expected to make in my writing routine and with my project was too much for me. And I ended up changing it. I started to feel creatively burnt out by trying to push myself to write a chapter a day. Who writes a chapter a day? I mean, if you can write a chapter a day, that is amazing, and I'm really impressed. But I have like an hour at night at best, and I can't write a chapter in an hour. And so it would just stack up. So that like, oh, I didn't complete chapter 3 yesterday, so I have to write chapter 3 and 4 today. And it was just unrealistic, and I was pushing myself too hard, so I changed that. I now have still that structured writing routine with every chapter scheduled out in my calendar, but I give myself 3 days to work on each chapter, and I have extra days for if I fall behind, and I take weekends off. So my writing routine frequency is 5 days instead of 7. And that might not seem like a lot, but it is. Because if I take 2 days off for my weekend and I don't think about writing and I don't work on it, sure. I went from this novel will be done in February to this novel will be done at some point at the end of May. But I'm making more progress now, and this novel might actually be done at the end of May. Whereas before, it was not going to be done at the end of February, and I was just freaking myself out for no good reason. So think about how frequently you want to write. For me, that's 5 days a week. For you, it might be 2. Or maybe 1. And that's totally fine. Maybe the writing sprints that you have once a month are 4 hours and mine are 5 times a week but only 1 hour. It doesn't matter. So write down how frequently you want to write and then move on to the reality. How often can you actually write? Now, I work from home. I only work part-time, so I can write every day. You might have 5 kids and a full-time job. I don't know. So be realistic. And don't decide on something that you can't maintain, because then you're just going to feel bad about it, and that's the opposite of what a writing routine is supposed to be. A writing routine is not an unrealistic goal to set yourself and then feel bad about not accomplishing. A writing routine is a realistic way to keep yourself accountable and fit writing into your busy life. So how often can you actually stand to write? Maybe you want to write 5 times a week, but you can only do it 3. That's fine, just do it 3. If your frequency that you want and your frequency that you can maintain line up, like mine, great. I mean, actually, realistically, no. I sort of wanted to write 7 days a week, but it just wasn't realistic for me. I would love to be the person that could write for 4 hours every day, but I just get creatively burnt out by that, so I cut it back. Be realistic and set yourself an attainable goal. Don't even use the word goal. Your writing routine is not a goal. Your writing routine is a practical way of trying to make writing a part of your life. So let's see. By the end of all this, you should have the times when you feel most inspired, the times that you're able to write in, the times that these things overlap, the length that you want to write, the length that you can afford to write, and how often these things overlap. The frequency that you want to write, the frequency you can afford to actually write, and how these things overlap. Now we're going to do some math. Take the times that you want to write and where they overlap with the times you can write, and write that down. Then take the length that you want to write and the length that you can actually write and write that down. And then do the same with the frequency that you want to do and the frequency that you can actually do and write that down. Now, there's 2 options here. Either you get something that's great and realistic, like maybe you got, I'm going to write at 5 o'clock before dinner 3 times a week for 2 hours. And you're like, great. Now, I have a great way to fit this into my busy schedule. Or maybe you get at 3 a.m. on Thursdays every other month, I'm gonna write. That's not necessarily great. It is an option. You could try it if you want, but I wouldn't personally recommend it. I think sleep is important. And maybe you get a writing routine that you're like, oh, I'm not happy with this at all. So that's where the training yourself part comes in, and the last thing that I'm going to be talking about. My current writing routine is mostly practical, as was my last writing routine. I'm not much of a wild inspiration hits me kind of a person. I'm more of like I sit down and suddenly there's inspiration because I'm writing now. So I usually have practical writing routines. And the way that this works is that I train myself that this is the time that I do it. So for example, if I go through this, it says that I should probably write around the middle of the day. But realistically, the middle of the day doesn't work for me because that's the one time that I have to hang out with my sister. That's my free time, but it's not really free because I want to hang out with my sister during that time. So I trained myself to do something different. Every night I finish up work around 6 and dinner isn't really till like 7. So I will finish up my work and then I will write until like 7. And I will do that for, I will write from 6 to 7, so that's a time and a length, and I do it 5 days a week. I take weekends off for creative burnout purposes. So that's the frequency, that's my writing routine. But this wasn't the writing routine that necessarily worked great for my natural inspiration schedule. I tend to be a little bit like sleepy by that time, and I'm just like, oh, I just finished work. I don't feel like doing anything mentally taxing. However, I've gotten used to writing at that time just by training myself that that's what I do. So that now when I sit down at my computer at 6 and I pull up my doc and I start writing, I've figured out ways to get myself into that headspace so I'm not forcing myself to write. I'm just sort of like training my body that this is when I'm supposed to write. And I did this before as well. My old writing routine for maybe like last year was that I wouldn't write all week, but then I would write for like 4 hours on the weekend because that's when I had off from work and I could do it then. Because I really struggle to focus on like projects if I know that there's something else I have to do later in the day. So like work. And naturally, am I inclined to write for 4 hours once a week in the morning? No, not at all. I'm sleepy in the morning. I want to sit around with my coffee. However, that was the time that I had free because after lunch, things pick up in my house. So before lunch was sort of the time that I had. And so I learned to write then. At least in my personal experience, if you write at the same time regularly enough, obviously don't force yourself, but if you give yourself a little bit of a nudge, your body and your mind will sort of get used to it. And in this way, you will be able to tailor your writing to your routine. So let's say you got that 3 a.m. every other month on Thursday routine. You're probably like, oh, that doesn't work. So you go through and you find the most convenient times, the most realistic times, frequencies, lengths, all that. And then you train yourself to work within that. And maybe you discover that if you read a chapter of your work before writing, that helps you get into the headspace. And that helps you train yourself that after I read this chapter at this time, it's writing time. I often do a bit of rereading before I write. Or maybe you start using music. I'll link a video up above about how music can help you be a better writer. Let's say you put together a playlist and you train yourself that every night you listen to this song and you write. And so then when you hear that song, you're like, oh, it's writing time. And your brain automatically is just like, here are the ideas I've been building up subconsciously all day. I don't know what this was, but just ignore that. Or maybe I know some people will like use candles, I think. So like to verify the different times of day. Let's say you have a certain scented candle that you burn when you write. And so when you brain smells that, it's just like, it's all about triggering your brain to be like, oh, it's that time. Because I've found that the hardest part is getting started, but once you're started and your brain is like, oh, this is what we're doing now, then the rest will just fall into place. So I hope that you don't get the 3 a.m. at Thursday every other month writing routine. Hopefully this little math equation I made helps you. But if you do get the 3 a.m. Thursday routine, try and train yourself to do a more realistic thing that works better for your schedule. And above all else, remember that a writing routine is not an unrealistic goal to set for yourself. If you miss it, that's fine. It's just a way to try and fit writing into our busy lives. Because a lot of writers, I see them in the comments talking about these cool ideas and they're like, but I haven't written it yet. This is how you write it. This is how you hold yourself accountable, but also how you actually find the time. So hopefully this helps you. I will put some videos up on the screen for, other stuff you might want to check out, like my music video, which I really do suggest. It's super helpful in this regard if you're trying to build like a playlist. It's also good for writer's block, and I feel like writing routines, writer's block, music, all this stuff is like super connected. And then I will also put up whatever the most recent video that I posted is. I suppose that's like over here-ish, maybe? And who knows what that is? Probably something cool. You should watch it. But thank you for watching this video. Please give this video a like. Comment your writing routine down below, what you got from this little math equation. Let me know if you got the 3 a.m. Thursday twice a month routine. That would be hilarious. Not for you, but it would be sort of funny if someone actually did get that. And I will see you on the next page. Thank you so much for watching. Till then.